My name is Joseph Lloyd and I'm an independent vehicle consultant. I find cars for people. Over the past year on my YouTube channel, I've done a series of about 25 reviews known as the Tweed Jacket reviews, where I've reviewed and assessed cars of all different shapes and sizes, old and new, expensive and cheap. I've had some feedback though from some of my viewers who obviously love the reviews, but want something a little bit less expensive. And so I present to you no budget reviews, all filmed on a phone, no fancy editing, no fluid head tripods, no DSLRs, just honest cars for less than £1,000 that you can pick up on the second-hand market. So join me on an adventure around the country as we go and find these cars for less than £1,000, and we have a lot of fun doing so. Today we're looking at this 2004 Suzuki Jimny. This has been supplied by Mr. Chris Phillips from Boats and Engines, who will be helping me to film this. As this is no budget reviews, there's not going to be any gimbal shots, anything like that, no swooping editing. We're just literally going to take a look at this car and see what the sort of things you should look out for, what they're like to drive and own. So if I open up the door, you'll see inside this is a proper off-roader. We've even got sort of bits of hay and things like that in there. Now the Jimnys were always a basic, rugged, simple car. This car's got a low-range gearbox, just a normal 5-speed manual. There was also an automatic available. And we've only got 4 seats in this car. The rears are folded at the moment. We'll put those up in a sec. Just a very typical dashboard of the late 1990s in Japan. These switches look familiar. The sort of grey plastics look familiar, but it's all very hard wearing. These are cars were a lot of fun, and of course, if you were to buy a new one, that would cost you at least £15,000. This one cost around the region of sort of £1,500 to £2,000. You can pick them up for about £1,000 for a very high mileage one, with an MOT, but just very high mileage. Probably recommend you spend a little bit more than that and get something like this, which is in actually quite a good condition for a car of this age that's used off-road regularly. But let's go around and take a look at the back. As you can see, we've got just 2 seats in here. If I were to flip these up, then you'd see that the boot is absolutely minuscule. I'm not surprised that Chris has these folded down at the moment, because it makes it a lot more practical for carrying trailer parts and hay and whatever else it is. A lot of these cars are owned by people who live in the country, and there's a very good reason for that. We'll get onto that when we do the road test section of the review. Rather kind of old-fashioned design here. The tailgate just swings out like this. Reminds me of something like a very old Mitsubishi Shogun, or indeed a Land Rover. The window does actually have heating on it, and the spare tyres on the boot. Now, people love Suzuki Jimnys. People who own them just swear by them, and it's not really difficult to see why. We've got the Suzuki Rhino, and 2 Rhinos, and this one's even got a tow bar on it. One of the things I find a bit funny about certain cars, and this goes right away to the modern ones, is the fact that you've got these indicators hidden in the bumpers like this, which I don't think is particularly good. I think they should be up there and it's a bit more visible, but you know, that's a minor point. This being a 2004 car, there are some minor differences between this and the original, which came out in 1998. This model was produced right away through to last year, 2018. And Chris is actually at the moment producing a kit to make your previous generation Jimny look like the new one. Obviously, you know, if you're buying a car for this kind of money, you know, we're no budget here, so making your car look newer and more fancy is obviously a good thing. This one's had a little bit of sort of paint on the front, just like so many older cars that have you know, red paint. This is all sort of flaking off everything. So this has been painted, and down here on the sort of chassis is something to be aware of here. Look underneath. They do rot, just like any Japanese car that was designed in the late 1990s. I don't know why so many of them have very poor rust protection from that era. Mazda MX-5 the same. Right, well, let's go round and sit in the driver's seat. Stepping into the car is really easy. One thing you'll notice straight away, because we're in a Jimny, this cabin is incredibly narrow. I mean, if you're of a more portly disposition, then if there are two of you in here, it's going to be a bit challenging, but never mind. The glove box is of a reasonable size. We've got all kinds of interesting things in there. Now, Jimnys do come with twin front airbags, and that's a very good safety feature. There aren't really you know, any other safety features in here. I'm not even sure you get traction control, to be honest. You get ABS. You know, ESC I think is fitted to some of the later cars, but this being an early car with a separate high and low range gearbox, this is the older style dashboard as well. You're not really going to find too much in the way of safety kit or luxury, but that's not why you buy a Jimny anyway. So we're now driving the Jimny, and it is a really fun experience. I can see why, you know, Chris has this as his daily driver, and you know, we're on the edge of the New Forest here, and it's a fantastic car to drive, just on these little lanes. We've got masses of transmission whine, we've got steering that's a little bit on the vague side, but it's a lot of fun. I mean, I don't recommend, particularly in a Jimny, going above 40 miles an hour, because the steering just gets so vague after that. But you know, below those speeds, driving moderately, this is not a sports car, and you know, the engine's not got much power anyway. The pre-facelift ones like this, they only have about 85 horsepower. And there was, you know, an engine before that, which was a different type of 1.3 engine. All Jimnys have a 1.3, but had even less power than that. This one, I think, has got a variable valve timing, but to be honest, you really wouldn't be using that unless you're doing something like a 0 to 40, which we're going to be doing on an abandoned airstrip later on, which sounds like a bit of fun. It's amazing to think that this car really doesn't have many rivals at all. The nearest thing you can think of in size to this would be something like a Fiat Panda 4x4, but that doesn't have a separate low-range gearbox like this. It doesn't have two live axles. We have got coil springs in here. It's not leaf springs or anything like that, like on a Land Rover, but it does feel really rather old-fashioned in some ways. But it is a lot of fun. I mean, the gearing is comically low for a car that would be driven primarily on the road. So we're up to 30 miles an hour here. I'm already touching 3,000 RPM, and we're in too high here, not in low or anything like that. But yes, it's just a wonderful car for its purpose. Some people drive these in the city because the visibility is absolutely amazing, as I've just found out when having a bit of a reverse there. And you can park these things anywhere. This one's even got a rear wiper that works, which is great. So for driving through forwards, as you've just seen, and negotiating forest tracks that you can see on a separate video where Chris was driving, this car is absolutely brilliant. The steering, like something like an old Vitara, is very, very, very vague. It's fine. You just got to make sure that you don't drive this like you would do your sort of average Super Mini, like an MT3, because it won't handle like that. It will grip absolutely fine. I mean, we're going into a corner sort of here, and that just holds on. That holds on okay. But you just got to make sure that you aren't trying to drive this like a sports car. Mind you, if you were in the city and you know, you were driving this at you know, speeds of below 40 miles per hour, it wouldn't really matter so much. I mean, you've got this sort of very narrow cabin here. You've got the very, very small dimensions overall, which means that actually getting it in and out of parking spaces, you know, negotiating through width restrictions, things like that, it's not a problem at all. Chris tells me that this car, if you drive it sensibly, will get you around 40 miles per gallon. Now, if you go anywhere near a dual carriageway or a motorway, and I think the top speed of this car will be somewhere around 90 miles per hour, I really wouldn't want to do that though. And you're going to find problems with the gearing. The gearing of this car, even in the too high setting, which you use for normal road conditions, is still really, really high. And so if you're going at 70 miles an hour, you're going to be pulling 4,000 RPM easily. And also the steering will be so vague that you won't enjoy it very much. So the car does demand a sort of more leisurely style of driving, apart from when you're off-road, when actually all the torque and all the power, because there's not much weight to this car and the engine's so small that you need to use all of it to actually get up hills. And in that respect, it is a lot of fun. Is actually a little bit on the jiggly side, and you can understand that. We've got big off-road tyres on this one anyway, which are standard. What I do like though is the fact that actually, you know, when you're going over the bumps, it will just not be affected by them in terms of putting damage on the car. One of the things that I remember the first time I drove this car a few weeks ago was the fact that, you know, we're going along this road on this sort of heath, and a lot of other cars would just let you kind of through. Would actually, you could just drive straight through the verge. It'd make no difference to you whatsoever if you did that. The only thing you notice is, of course, the traction levels of driving in gravel and mud are different from those on tarmac, so you probably notice a bit of slippage. So it's best not to do that too fast, but you just would not be troubled by surfaces that other cars would get completely stuck in. We're going to do a quick 0 to 40 here, get to speed limit, go! Oh my gosh. Whoa! 30. 40. Okay, well, it's not the fastest car in the world, and my gosh, it's bumpy. We're on a strip of airfield here. This was abandoned, I think, in the late 40s actually. The ride's a little bit rough. It's not the sort of thing that I think normally you'd take on a drag strip, but it is hilarious. As you can see, Chris did the shot for me when he drove off in the back. That wasn't me, honest gov. Yes, it was an interesting sort of thing. The gear change though in this car was one of the best things about it. It's really, really nice. It's surprisingly nice actually. It's a typical Japanese style with just a 5-speed box and the reverse down to the right hand side there. But yeah, it's a car that you can have a lot of fun with in unexpected ways. The side being a little on the vague side is also incredibly high geared, so it's, I don't know how many times lock to lock it is, and you expect when you're correcting it after going around the corner, but it will come back into line a lot better than it does. There's not much in the way of kind of self-centering in this car at all. It's something that takes a while to get used to, but I imagine what it's designed for is if you're off-road or, well, in the city actually, if you want to negotiate really tight little bends and very narrow trackways, it's ideal. But if you're just used to driving a car that has you know, normal design for the roads, then you will find it takes a bit getting used to. So we've just come back from the test drive portion of the review, and I just wanted to point out these very typical 1990s Japanese car heater and ventilation switches. Also, there is a clock in this car. If I put the key of the ignition, which is a little beep, which is another annoying thing, you can see, you can't really see, if you're driving, you can't see where the clock is at all. Something else that's unusual, this being a UK market car, it's actually got the wipers on the wrong side. So the wipers are on the left and the indicators and lights are on the right. Another unusual thing is these the window switches. They're actually in a line because the doors are so narrow that you can't put them side by side. It's unusual, isn't it? So here's the 1.3 engine, which develops in this car around 85 horsepower. This one's actually in quite good condition. It's not leaking from the cam cover gasket. It is a twin cam engine, although it seems rather agricultural because the transmission noise inside the car is a lot more than you'd get from, say, I don't know, a Swift or whatever it is. This being a pre-facelift car, we've just got normal looking headlights. The later ones did have some more fancy looking ones. Thank you for watching this no budget review. Thank you once again to Chris from Boats and Engines channel for the kind loan of his car. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. My Facebook page, facebook.com/Lloyd Vehicle Consulting, particularly if you wish to source a car for you. I've also got a website, which is www.lloydvehicleconsulting.co.uk. Next time on No Budget Reviews, well, we'll still have no budget, but I have no idea what sort of car it'll be. Hopefully, it'll be interesting.